Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's
Morning.
8:30. Christina, have you heard from anyone?
I am
Good
texting. Good morning, Jair.
Okay. And also I did not see Chief Ken.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Kim, I love your hair.
Thank you. Thank you. Just doing something different to take care of it. So thank you. I see Jahira just joined. So we do have at least one other board member.
Checking with Mr. Walker and
Okay. I do want to go ahead and somewhat start on time, and I know usually we don't depend on Chief Penn for our contracts. So with that, because I see at least Jahira, I'm just going to go ahead and start us off. So welcome to the Hartford Board of Education. Are we good, Christina?
yes, sorry.
Okay, good. So welcome to this morning's Hartford Board of Education Finance and Audit Committee. My name is Kim Oliver. I am chair, and I want to start off by thanking Mr. Tyrone Walker for his service as chair over the last year. Today's meeting, we do have some items to review for the regular meeting, which are 3 contracts. And then we, of course, have our financial reports. So with that, let's jump in with the first contract. Christina.
Okay, so let me just share my screen really quick. So we are starting with the contracts that were vetted through committee. This contract, the IAG International Alliance Group, is for the J1 visas that will help support our Caribbean connections. But and we did vet this through the Teaching and Learning Committee. But more importantly, we have Dr. Curtis on the call, who will be here to take any or go walk us through the financial piece and take any questions.
Thank you. Good morning. So this contract in full was presented to the Teaching and Learning Committee by Nancy Williams. I was in negotiations when they met, so I wasn't able to attend, but this is an extension of a contract that I brought to the board a year ago. And essentially, the International Alliance Group is the organization that provides the J1 visa sponsorship for the district. So they do all the paperwork, they do all the logistics, they vet all the candidates through their frontline system. They ensure that the candidates have a level of English proficiency. They provide a level of professional development for the transition into the United States. And they ensure that the candidates can, in fact, get licensed in the state of Connecticut and be viable professionals in the state. So with all of that said, last year we executed a 1-year contract. However, the 4 professionals that we recruited from the DR last year that have J1 visas will be here for 3 years with the option of working for 5 years, having their contract extended or their J1 visa extended beyond the 3 years to 5 years. However, in partnership with IAG, we pay every year for those professionals to be in our district. So we have 4 right now. Our contract expires with IAG in June, but those 4 professionals will still be with us for at least another 2 years. So we're asking for an extension on this contract so that we can continue to in fact, employ the 4 candidates that we have now who have been successful in their teaching assignments so far, and then continue to recruit J1 visa teachers going forward.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Curtis. Ms. Escorbano, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My only question is, it sounds like we have to stay in compliance with the federal government on this. And if we did not work with this vendor, we would have to find service to be able to do that. Is that correct, Dr. Curtis?
Yes, well, we wouldn't be able to have J1 visa teachers in the district any longer. It's important to note that the district does not have access to J1 visas outside of partnering with an organization that does sponsorship. Right now, the state only has 4 contracts that they honor for J1 visa sponsorship. So outside of this organization, there are only 3 other options, and all 4 of them have a fee for sponsoring J1 visa teachers.
Thank you, Dr. Curtis. Welcome, Mr. Walker. Good morning. You missed my thank you to you for your service for the past year as finance chair. We're just on the first contract, and just want to see if you have any questions regarding the International Alliance Group.
Yeah, good morning. I had a bit of a travel time, and thanks, Kim, for the comments. Yeah, I think Chief Kirby talked about this before. I think when we looked at the work last year, I remember your report out last time. They produced 4 results. You had 4 international candidates last time you reported out to us. And I'm assuming those 4 international candidates you reported out on your status was using IAG. I didn't see any other use of IAG. So I guess my question is, how much production are we getting through IAG? And are you saying IAG is the only option?
So for us right now, IAG is the only option, because if we went out and selected a different vendor, which we have interviewed other organizations that sponsor J1 visas. The problem is the state of Connecticut, the Department of Education would have to accept those organizations as vendors as well. And they have said they are not accepting any more vendors. So we literally slid in with IAG at the last minute last year in that partnership. And yes, the J1 visa teachers that we have last year are still with us. And also what's important to note is through Caribbean Connections, we are sourcing our own talent. So we're finding individuals that we think will be great fits for us. We're interviewing them. They're doing panel interviews with schools, with principals, with directors in the district. And then we're sending them to IAG to have their J1 visa processed through there. So they're not only sourcing talent for us, we're sourcing our own international talent as well.
I guess, given what you'd expressed to me, I thought the way that, so help me understand the financial element then, because before IAG would get a portion of that, if you hire the person, the previous arrangement was they get a portion of the salary for 2 years or 3 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Then that's what, I am, given what you told me, just not happy. Feel like we're being snookered. In terms of what you've just said, if they're literally processing stuff for us, then if it was up to me, I would want to have a situation where I pay them all up front, transactionally, tell me what it costs. If it costs 10G, 20 grand, 30 grand, 40 grand, I'm almost indifferent. Just do the transaction, let me pay you up front, and let me then have my resource. But to have them get a portion of salary for 3 years, I'm not sure what the value is there when all they're doing is transacting some paperwork after you've already identified, found the talent, and actually brought the talent to them. Is there a way to rework this arrangement with IAG?
So we met with international law firms. We met with law firms who specialize in international, bringing in professionals into the United States. We also met with several folks who do this work in their organization. And what's important to note is the State Department only issues so many visas a year to an organization. The organization itself, if they want to have J1 visa sponsorship, like if Hartford wanted to sponsor their own J1 visas, we have to do an application to the Department of State, which takes years and is not guaranteed. And then if you get that application approved, they only give you so many visas. So any organization that sponsors visas has a very limited amount. So what we're paying for is access to those J1 visas, because there's no way for us to access them because we don't have a contract with the Department of State. So and then in order to maintain those J1 visas, you have to have the transactional arrangement, right? So it's not just on the front end, someone gets a J1 visa, they're working in the United States, and that's it. It's a consistent, like the workflow is consistent over time while that person is still in the United States. And then when the J1 visa ends, the process of getting them back to their home country. So it isn't just when they get here, that's the only transaction that happens. It's consistent across their time working in the United States. And so we're paying essentially for the compliance to make sure that this foreign professional in the United States is working under the right conditions. And then when that visa is up, we'll return home.
Okay, thank you. I would, I guess, request that we reevaluate this. I would like to say, because this is a V1 situation based on what you said, that we're going to be re-upping them time and time again. The activity you talk about needs to happen. I just would be more confident if I understood we're getting the best value, best cost, can't do any better until we come up with a longer term solution, like you're saying. Another company and the district may never want to do J1 themselves, but that's all that I mean. At the end of the day, we'll have to prove them that they're our only option. Okay. It just doesn't feel like we're driving a hard bargain with these folks. And it feels like they're the only game in town and they're calling all the shots. And it just feels like even in the long term, if that's the case, I'd be okay to say then we got to do this. We have to do this today, but longer term, we will develop somebody else. It may take a year or two. We'll develop another alternative. And then the alternative will give us maybe some better options in terms of cost or in terms of what they offer for the expense.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. So I'm hearing that there's a request for kind of future planning as it relates to J1 visas. Is that fair, Mr. Walker?
Well, I'm not saying, yeah, I'm saying let's bring it back. Let's really dig into this thing. It's not in this form. Let's really dig into and understand exactly what we're paying for. And then I'm saying, let's see what the other alternatives are. If you're saying no, that's all I'm saying. So let's put that as a real action and let's carve out some time to actually do that. And so
I just have a point of clarification back to Dr. Curtis. I'm hearing there are no alternatives in this moment. Is that correct, Dr. Curtis?
That is correct in this moment. And what Mr. Walker is talking about, we did some of that this year. We met with the Connecticut Department of Education to determine if we could source any additional vendors. Like if we found a vendor that we could get a better rate, would they accept the vendor? They said no. Then we went out and said, like, what are some other ways in which we can access J1 visas? That's when we found out that there only are a limited amount. So we can't go get our own. And if we find someone who has J1 visas at a lower rate, we can't even be in partnership with them because the Connecticut Department of Education won't accept a new vendor right now. So what we were doing was kind of putting all of our ducks in a row in the event that the Department of Education loosened that requirement for taking on additional vendors, so then we can slide in there with another vendor.
Okay, I got it. All I'm saying is that bring that. I wouldn't have found that out unless I press on that today. So what I'm asking is then let's bring it so we can see it. I'd join you in pressing the state and let's teeing it up. And so the first time it's available, let's do it. I'm okay. But I do want to see that data and then understand it. Partner with us, let us understand. We can help you even make that argument with the State Board of Ed, helping them understand the criticality of it to us.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Also, I just want to acknowledge this did go through Teaching and Learning Committee, so I do expect Dr. Curtis, those follow-ups will likely also have to go back to that committee as well. I welcome Ms. Brody. I see your hand up. You have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. I share the same sentiments of board member Walker. And it just makes me think of a time on this board that we're revisiting. First, I do want to mention that when we don't have comparisons, to Mr. Walker's point, if he didn't press for his questions, he would have never been presented with all of the things that at least some of us are learning this morning. So if we don't have a comparison of what the cost is to go in another direction, or the cost of the process for us to do it on ourselves, or just some background information, I don't think that doesn't make me comfortable, because what it feels like is years ago on the board, when board members were complaining that basically our backs are always up against the wall. In this moment, right now, this is needed. And so you have to make a decision between, do we do this because time is so limited, or do we say no because you should have had these type of conversations or provided this information and let board members have information to make a decision on? Because we set up a process, or at least asked enough questions, right? That we want information. And it seems like every time we're talking about a contract, it's like, oh, we'll get more information. Oh, we'll get that. But we got to vote on Tuesday. So that I hate that feeling, because it feels like you have to make decisions. Oh, we need these teachers. So I don't even think that's a question, that's a comment. But I do have a question, because I noticed that the agenda says vetted. And I mentioned in one of the committees last month about what vetting means. And then vetting has to be, I think is a thing, maybe it's floating around board leadership, because Miss Escribano, and she's on the call, thought it was important enough, because she left the board meeting and then she came back to sit down to actually clarify some quote unquote vetting communication or miscommunication or misunderstanding in a community. Vetting used to be on this board that it was presented in committee. It was a consensus in committee, literally board member such and such, do you feel comfortable with moving this to the board? Board member such and such, do you feel comfortable? That's not happening. So I don't know what we're associating vetting with. What happens in committee now is presented. And then it's like, okay, next agenda item. That's not vetting. That's just a presentation was done. There's not a consensus. So I don't know what committee that needs to be. Maybe it does need to be handled here, because this is where it goes after the quote unquote vetting happens. Because we haven't vetted anything in a very long time. We've just heard from whomever, and it winds up in finance as if it was vetted, and it's then appears on our regular agenda. That's all I have at the moment, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Ms. Brody. Just a point of clarification. This contract was presented to Teaching and Learning Committee. I did not attend that meeting. I don't know if others on this call have attended that meeting. I say that because I want to acknowledge information was presented to board members. I'm not commenting on in terms of enough time and all of that, but I just wanted to acknowledge that information was shared at that other committee as well.
Shared, yes. Vetted, what is that? That's where I'm stuck on.
Yeah, so just because in our policies, I don't think the word vetting is actually there. Our job is to actually review. I'm going to use the word review today just to keep things hopefully with a shared understanding. And just going back specifically to this contract, based on what Dr. Curtis has shared with us, is that based on the regulations of the state and also Department of State, we have 4 teachers. It looks like it could end up being more than 4 teachers, but currently 4 teachers that require this level of processing. This is the only vendor that is available to Hartford Public Schools. So with that, are there any other questions? All right, moving on to the next contract, approval of lease, Ms. Santiago.
Okay, the central office lease, we have Chief Davis Googe on the call. And I have the item in board docs, but I will also be sharing a presentation. Give me 1 second.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, Christina. You can go to the next slide. So I'm here today to provide an update on the Buckley High School construction project and to share the rationale for the central office relocation. Wanted to start with the renderings of the entry and the street view of the building. As we walk through this brief presentation, I'm asking you to keep in mind the detail that you see, the windows, the coloring, which is considered the skin of the building. This major transformation is one of the key reasons for the relocation. So just want you to keep that in mind. You could go to the next rendering. And that's the street view. So again, just please keep in mind what you see there. Thank you, Christina. So I want to give some background on the construction project. The renovation project started April 2019. The original construction period for Buckley High School and our administrative offices, which includes the high school central office, print shop, and commissary, was scheduled to end August 2024. You have there, you see the project costs, Buckley High School at $149 million, and the administrative offices at $29.75 million, which is at a 95% reimbursement rate through the state of Connecticut, Office of School Grants, Construction and Review. So in the summer of 2022, our students relocated to the swing space. Grades 9 and 10 were at 585 Wethersfield Avenue, and grades 11 and 12 at 395 Lime Street. August 2020, central office relocates from 960 to our renovated space here on the first floor. And spring 21, the renovation starts. The demolition and abatement causes excessive noise. There was concerns around the noise level. The space was kind of rendered unworkable at times. We were unable to speak by phone, Zoom calls, and also raised some concerns due to the shaking of our floors. October 21 is when we first got word from our program manager that there may be a need for us to relocate into swing space. The next phase of work included roof replacement, air handling units, and window installation. The project had been planned as an occupied renovation. After many meetings and discussions as to why we had to make a pivot, it was determined that the high school design plans were finalized after central office relocated. So the intent for the construction team to work around the central office space was not feasible no longer. It would be too intrusive. At that time, October 2021, we were considering a 9-week relocation period. Next slide. So towards the end of the year, that's when the project delays truly started. November 2021, the construction plan slowed due to the bids trending much higher than expected, meaning that the next phase of work, which included the roof replacement, installation of the new building skin and windows, and site work, came in much higher than expected. The estimated costs were no longer valid due to the pandemic. supply chain issues. The program manager began value engineering efforts to stay within the budget. So that was like the first sign of like a delay. And then in addition, in February 2022, the state underwent a leadership change, which led to an audit across current projects across the state. And there was a concern that the approved costs and our reimbursement rates for the central administration project did not align with the current legislation. So I know there may be questions on that, but in short, the costs that were outlined for central administration was the reimbursement rate. We had it as 95%. The state was concerned that it didn't align, and I believe that reimbursement rate for central administration projects was less than 80%. So we had to go back and do some work. Hartford Public Schools, the city, the project manager, and the state, we worked through this issue, and by summer 2022, through special legislation, this concern was resolved. The project was back on track. However, the number of starts and stops and reassessments significantly delayed the project. So October 22, the program manager again made the request for us to vacate the premises and the Welcome Center to relocate to another location for summer 2023 through summer 2025. I'm going to pause here for questions because I think I've said a lot in the last two slides.
Board members, any questions? Mr. Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. This is Chief David Skloot, just clarification. I thank you for presentation. I think you confirmed what was said initially, which is the project can be extended out a year. That's correct?
Yes.
And then you further added, I think, the idea that the work that needs to be done to the exterior of the building is one of the drivers now for having removed everyone from the building.
I'm going to go with, oh, I'm sorry.
I may be jumping ahead, so if I'm.
Oh, no, it's okay. I will share that the primary driver is the students being not able to return to the building until 2026. But
2026, excuse me.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Okay.
certainly the roof, like being ripped off the building and the wall certainly does not allow for a productive workspace.
Okay, thank you. I just needed to just make sure I heard it exactly correctly. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
So
you.
that's actually a good segue. That's where I was going next. So if central.
Oh, so Ms. Brody has
Oh,
her
I'm
hand up.
sorry.
I'm sorry, Ms. Brody.
Good morning, Chief. So the reason for how much will Hartford Public Schools end up paying after it's all said and done for this move
Mhm.
of central office?
So I'm actually going there next. The goal is that the cost is absorbed through the construction project. That
Is that
ask-
guaranteed?
I'm sorry,
Is that guaranteed?
it is not guaranteed.
So
The-
would it be helpful then for us to continue with the slides?
yes,
So, and then Ms. Brody, we can come back to you if you still have questions.
thank you, Christina. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So here we have the rationale for the relocation. As I shared, if central office remained on site, it would decrease staff productivity, increase the project costs, and extend the project timeline for additional year. Again, our students have been in the swing space since the 2021 school year. The original date for the students' return was August 2024. COVID pushed that to August 2025. And if we didn't relocate, then the project would be pushed to August 2026. Our students wouldn't be back until August 2026. What I will talk about now is, so in January 2023, the program manager formally shared the plan for the cost to be covered. In short, the swing space lease costs would be included in the upcoming grant revision submission that would be submitted to the state, meaning that the cost would be submitted to the state as a reimbursable cost. That ask will go before the state within the next month or so, and that determination will be made. The program manager is hopeful, very hopeful that it would be included. One reason is because the project is trending higher than expected, which will require a new scope of work / educational specifications. And in those new specs, we will be including the swing space. So it will be approved as a whole project, the scope of the project changing. So Ms. Brody, yes, the expectation is that it should be covered because the project would be extended a year out, which would significantly increase the project costs. So we believe that the state would be in favor of reimbursing the swing space. I would also add that this is just not a Hartford Public Schools, this increase in the project costs. This is something that's been an issue across the state as these school construction projects had to withstand the pandemic. Did I address your question, Ms. Brody?
I'll wait till it continues. Okay, hold on.
Okay. So at the time we got the second request from October 2022 to January 2023, the city of Hartford, the program manager, Arcadis, Hartford Public Schools, we engaged in a relocation feasibility planning process. The space requirements you see there, we need a cubicle office space for approximately 160 staff. We needed this place to be furnished and networked due to the limited time we had to relocate. And there definitely had to be a public-friendly welcome center space. We started with school spaces and determined that that wasn't a feasible option because most of our school spaces are shared with community partners. And we, through the process of COVID, had transitioned a lot of the available spaces for student support and wellness spaces. And also there was significant limited parking. Remote work was also considered. We did consider it for that 9-week period, but to extend it for a 20-month period would require a development of a new way of work, such policies and systems as well. And the fact that some of our departments have to front face with the public and our families on a daily basis, remote work was also ruled out. And then we also looked at some available city properties. 110 Washington Street was the only feasible space. Turned out that the renovation costs and the parking limitations also ruled that space out. So our resort was to turn to lease properties. We looked at 1 American Row. We looked at 280 Trumbull Street, 350 Church Street, and 960 Main Street. Next slide. So after much deliberation, the recommendation was made for 280 Trumbull Street. The space had met our space requirements. Would like to share with you all that because of the rate of vacancy spaces in the city of Hartford, we were able to get a reduced lease cost. You see here is $17 per square foot. Pre-COVID, the rates were $22 and up. So we were able to take advantage and gain some cost savings there. Our parking is $125 per space. That's actually reduced from $160 by the Hartford Parking Authority. We were able to work with the city on that. This space was already networked, which certainly saved us a huge amount of dollars. MHIS estimated about 200,000. And then our moving costs would be minimal because there would be no furniture moves. Only our work materials would need to be delivered to the site. So let me see if I'm forgetting anything else important. So for the 20-month period, it would be $1.4 million. Again, our goal is to ensure that it could be reimbursed through the construction project. However, since that hasn't been acted upon yet, if you recall in last week's budget meeting, Chief Penn included a one-year cost in next year's budget. Yep, so we can open up for questions.
Thank you, Chief Davis Googe. I will go back first to Ms. Brody. Ms. Brody, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, my background was loud. I was trying to wait till it passed. So we are, and this is on, is there a dollar amount? And I'm sorry that we are actually saying, like, when we read the motion, we're saying the $1 million amount to approve.
So I would say to answer to that is no, but I'm gonna ask Chief Penn to support me here.
So can you just, I want to make sure I understood the question. It's to approve the lease, correct? And I would imagine it's for the full term of the lease. So all in, those costs for the lease are 1.6 million, is that correct? If I remember the number correctly?
Yeah, we did some fine tuning, so it's closer to 1.4 now. But her question is, are we asking them to approve the 1.4 million, knowing that we are going for state reimbursement?
Yeah, I think that's the safety net, right? If for some reason that state reimbursement fails, and we still need a way of paying the vendor before the reimbursement comes through.
And
so I guess, go
Mhm.
ahead.
No, I was just going to share that that would be something that we would collaborate with the city on. But the 1.4 million covers April 2023 to summer 2025. So Chief Penn, I guess that's why I was wondering, would we state the full amount of 1.4 million?
Yeah, because if we're asking them at the full board meeting to approve the lease itself, it should reflect the total value.
Understood.
So we are unsure of what we may or may not be paying.
No, I think we know what we're going to be paying. And the question is whether or not the state's going to reimburse 95% of that cost or not.
So we don't, so that's fair then. We're saying, let's spend this 1.4, but the state may reimburse us for 95% of it.
Correct.
So when we say we, Hartford Public Schools or the city of Hartford?
Hartford Public Schools.
Okay, because this has been presented to, I've heard this as a board member, and the way it's presenting itself today is not what I thought the superintendent communicated with the city absorbing the cost.
Yeah, I think it's something that we will continue to deliberate on, meaning that once we get the information from the state, then the city and Hartford Public Schools will talk about the next steps. Chief Penn, that's how I understood it.
Yeah, that's kind of the take we had as well. I mean, there was some certainty on our part that we thought this would be rolled into the construction project, and then there was less certainty as that evolved, which is why we put it into next year's budget. And we factored it into that, the current estimate for this year. And, you know, we're certainly hopeful we see reimbursement from the state, but we needed to make sure that we had the ability to cover the lease cost if for some reason that didn't materialize.
Yeah, this process, see, as a board member, I'm confused because this question definitely has come up in the community around payment, moving of staff because they don't want to hear noises, that sort of thing. But so we were presented with, this might be an expense as a board. Then we were presented with, oh, the city is gonna wrap this up in construction. Then it popped up in our budget. Then now it's here saying we might not. So it's a lot of, I'm not comfortable because I'm not clear. But
Yeah,
it's,
Ms. Brody, as one of your
Yeah.
representatives on the Harper School Board, School Building Committee rather, I want to acknowledge the confusion that we all have actually, and this is being driven by the state. It's been a lot of back and forth and it's been very confusing.
yeah, but Madam Chair, it can be confusing, but what we count on is our superintendent to make it clear for us. So that's the part where I'm saying all of that communication, especially with, oh, the city is wrapping it up, when it's no deliberate conversation just on this item. Because when I seen it in the budget, I'm like, okay, but we were told that. So I shouldn't have to make a roadmap for myself. It should be like clear. This, we were going to pay. It was clear we were going to have to pay, or they were going to ask board members for permission to pay. We were going to vote on it. That was clear. Then what was clear is, oh, it's going to be wrapped up in the construction costs. That was clear. Then it came in when it popped up in a budget, that made it unclear. And now we're here today saying the state may not reimburse, and the city, I get them, we're not paying. We want to make sure it's reimbursed before, but that wasn't the feel, that the city was only on board because the state was going to potentially reimburse at 95%. So it changed, but as a board, there was never a bringing back of us to say we were at A, then we went to B, now we're on C. So that part is why I'm confused. I'm not confused because of the state process. I'm confused because the informing of board members, at least me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brody. Mr. Rigger.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I actually somewhat agree with Board Member Brody. I think not necessarily around the confusion, but certainly around just the communication or better communication around some of the moving pieces. Again, I know these things are never finalized until they're finalized, but I think just as a best practice, as situations change, even if it's a quick email or something, just communicating to the board, right? Like, here's where we were, 10 days ago, here's what the state is saying now, and so forth. But my question to the team here is, what is your confident level of the 95% reimbursement from the state? Right. So I know we budgeted, we have it in the budget, which is a worst case scenario, but I'm just trying to get a sense of, I guess, confidence level that we actually will get reimbursed at 95% rate.
So we have a memo from Arcadis, the program manager, who explains fully their process of submitting for the reimbursement. Currently, the project costs are significantly higher than what they proposed. And again, that is an issue across the state with many construction projects. So in their estimation, that's going to require a new ed spec and also require the state to go to the legislator to get additional monies. Built into that ask is going to be this ask to cover the lease costs. Because the ask to continue the project is much higher than the swing space, the absence of the swing space will actually increase that cost to be much higher. So they are very confident that it will be reimbursable. However, I'm not going to like Chief Penn put it in a budget, because you just don't want to just say 100% that the state is going to be on board, right? It's kind of been a moving target with them since they have a new, and I'm not going to say a moving target with them. It's just been a lot that has happened over the last year with their change in leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brody, and then Mr. Walker.
This is what okay. This is what just came to me. So it was presented to us because it was going to be like a standalone thing. We were this lease, right? Then, because it appears in a budget, essentially, we approved something that we were talking about singularly. We were talking about just this move. We had questions. We asked more questions. We were going to be given brought back to the table, be given a presentation. So now that never happened, but it ended up in the budget, which was voted on. So in essence, we already voted on it in a budget, and we're just talking about the lease. Because the funds, am I correct that they were already voted on in our budget? Is that fair?
Chief Penn?
If the amount was if the question was the amount included in next year's budget for what we think it's going to cost us next year, the answer is yes.
Okay, so that's what happened. So it was not a standalone item. We didn't have to deliberate about it. We didn't have to come back to the table with the questions that were asked, because it was up in the budget. So that's how that happened. And I'm even more disappointed because it was a lot. I had more questions on it, but I was relieved of them, being that we were told that the city would take on the cost. But my question now is if anyone can clarify exactly why we're relocating. Are we relocating because Central, and I really love you guys at Central Office, so don't take this like mean and harsh, right? That you don't want to hear noise, because to taxpayers, to the community, that's not our priority. Like you can hear a little noise. So is it what if it had nothing to do with the noise and affecting the work, which was explained? What is the reason student-wise that students can't get in the building closer to schedule if Central Office is still in the building? Like, could we separate those two things for a minute?
So I'll answer it this way. I think the issue is twofold. One is they're going to tear the roof off the building and tear down walls to put windows, right? They have to install an HVAC system. There is no way we could be in the building. If we were in the building, that work would happen on weekends. And at some point of that period, we would have to be out the building. And that would require them to build swing space for us on the property, perhaps off the property, I'm not sure. But the amount that they gave us for us to support swing space for us is $4 million. Two is that work has to occur. And if it didn't occur within the 2.5 year, the 24-month period that we would be gone, the students wouldn't come back to the building until August 2026. So we had multiple meetings about the best way to manage this, right? Our students have been out the building since 2021. So our goal is to make sure our students are back. It was already delayed a year. We want our students back August 2025. So to your question, there is two concerns. The building cannot be occupied in the next phase with the work that has to be done. And our goal is to get our students back as soon as possible. Without vacating, our students wouldn't be back to August 2026. So it's not just about the noise level, it's about safety. Again, I shared that it was a planned occupied renovation, but the high school design was not completed till after we relocated. So then there was a pivot to say, we're sorry, it cannot be an occupied renovation while we go through these last phases of work.
All right, I want to go ahead and go to Mr. Walker. Ms. Brody, if you have other questions, we can come back to you. Mr. Walker.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Davis-Gut, thanks for that feedback. But the exchange with Board Member Brody, I think, to me, tells me we've had a significant communication issue. Just a little direct feedback. I've always seen this as having a bit of a health and safety component. And in terms of the communication, it may even be worth it to have there's health and safety officials who can kind of give corroborating reports and feedbacks to say, here's why someone can't be in the building. I think so that's a good explanation. And and Chief Penn, thank you, because you've answered the question I was going to ask. So we've already put this worst case into our budget. So there's not going to be a communication of a further go get for ourselves in the upcoming year. So I guess I haven't asked then. It feels like we need kind of a one pager. I think Chief Davis-Gut, what you kind of bulleted, here's some criteria as to why we did leave. This is criteria for, they're just communication points you brought up that think if the board had it on a one-sheeter, it talked about why they're leaving, criteria to re-entry and all that type of information. It'd just be helpful. It also, to me, at times when we have this moving target, what we call like trigger points that would tell us we need to reconvene because something in our understanding has changed. If we put that criteria together, it would come across to the public that we're not just continuing to change the narrative. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and you're going to say, we're going to go along with this understanding, but if we hit this trigger point, then we're going to reconvene and we're going to reassess and we'll communicate something new. Right now, we probably as a board just don't have those trigger points to communicate to people, to tell people. Chief Davis-Gut, I think you seem to have that information. Does it make sense to maybe have like a one-sheeter with some criteria in it, a little few explanations so that we can all talk from the same sheet of music, and then also be able to tell people, but if this happens, everything I just told you is not going to be true anymore, and we'll have to communicate something new. Does that make sense?
Yep, I can certainly do that. I would just like to say, though, I believe that it was communicated that how we were going to manage this cost was something that was going to be a collaboration between the state, the city, and Hartford Public Schools. So I guess I'm just wondering when that, I just want to just be sure that, we're not saying that the narrative changed. We were just trying to cover all bases.
I agree. And I agree with what you're saying.
Okay.
I'm saying something that helps us talk from the same sheet of music, and one that tells people that it's shifting and whatnot, because it feels like the lack of clarity that Board Member Brody is saying, give people in the community the idea to take narratives different directions and stuff like that, where maybe some clarifying points would help level set everybody in the same direction. That's just my feedback. And if that could be an action, that would be good.
Yep, I can fulfill that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any other questions? Waiting just a moment in case someone has questions. If not, moving on to the next contract. Thank you, Chief Davis Googe,
You're welcome.
for the Aviana healthcare contract. Christina.
We have Jennifer Hoffman on the call for this Aviana contract amendment approval. Let me just share, as you can see as you can see, it was a contract that was around 45,000, but they need to increase it so that it is now above 50,000, requiring a Board of Education approval. So Ms. Hoffman.
Thanks, Christina. Good morning, everyone. This increase is to include 2 LPNs for 2 students that require one-to-one nursing services during the school day, including transportation to and from school. So like Christina said, it is just an increase from the $45,000 to the $65,000.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Any questions? I don't see any other hands up. Just checking one more time. Any questions on this contract? All right, thank you, Ms. Hoffman.
No.
We're gonna move forward. Thank you. On to our updates and reports. Chief Penn.
Sure. Good morning again, everyone. I'll make this relatively quick. You'll see in front of you the memo that we put together for financial results through the period ended January 31st, our period 7 for the fiscal year. And to kind of come down to the punchline, one of the things that we're looking at obviously very, very closely this year is the estimated deficit for 22-23. We've covered a lot of the reasoning around the deficit, the correct tuition, the drop in the magnet school operating grant, other factors as well. At the end of the prior month, we had estimated about a $6.4 million deficit. We've moved that projection downward in the past month to between 3.5 and 4.5 million. That's largely as a result of re-estimating the vacancies that we have and the persistency of them. There was one minor item that popped up that we hadn't anticipated. That was roughly about $190,000 for elevator maintenance and repair costs that exceeded our budgetary estimates for the year. We've now factored that in to the 3.5 to 4.5 million. And as I shared with Marv last week, and I'll share it again here too, those numbers are probably conservative, and they're likely conservative because when we do our projections, we assume that every non-personnel budget line gets fully expended by the end of the year. And that's typically not the case, particularly within the general fund. We will push very hard to try and get expenditures to the maximum value of the grant and all our grant funds, but it's rare that we actually would exceed or fully expend all the non-personnel items in the general fund budget. So we are still kind of optimistic, regardless so, that vacancies and some of these other factors are going to get us back to a balanced budget by year end. We do continue to have the hiring freeze where it's appropriate. Obviously, if you saw the materials that got sent out last week in response to one of the board members' questions, there's actually a fairly limited number of positions that freeze impacts because we're continuing to operate the schools whenever they need to be successful. But I continue to be, like I said, guardedly optimistic. And then the last 3.5 months here, we're going to come closer and closer to break even, if not slightly exceed it. Christine, if we can roll down to the memo that talks about the ESSER spends. Yeah, that one there. So just so everybody understands how this is laid out, if you're seeing it from for the first time, we've got 3 primary ESSER grants that total up to about $155 million, as you see there in the total grant award. ESSER 1, the deadline for spending ended last September 30th, so that grant is effectively closed out at this point. ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 are the ones that are remaining. ESSER 2 expires this coming September, but we're really trying to push hard to try to get that spent as best as possible by this coming June 30th. A lot of the SEIG work that went into the schools is funded by ESSER 2 with that in mind. ESSER 3 is the largest of the three grants. It's also the one that has the furthest out date in terms of expiration. And you can see through the end of January, out of the 154 or so million, we've spent or encumbered about 61.4 million. That was up about $4 million from the prior month, which still leaves us about $93 million left. We did a lot of presentations during the budget cycle around what the plans are for those remaining amounts. I mean, they're largely the plans that have been in place since these grants were developed upwards of 2 years ago. But we also plan on using, as I know you're aware, $9.2 million of what is effectively the ESSER 3 grant as an offset to next year's budget deficit projection. So, you know, we're working hard to make sure all this money gets spent as planned, because we don't want to put ourselves in a position to have to return any of this. And we're pushing hard to make sure that the ESSER 2 money gets spent as quickly as possible, knowing that that's the next expiration date. So that's just kind of the thumbnail sketch of where we are financially at this point.
Thank you, Chief Penn. Any questions?
I have one. I wasn't able to get to my raise hand quick enough.
Sure, Ms. Purdy.
For the tuition comment, so we say correct rise in tuition. Could we just get a correct raise tuition for this amount of students and it caused this increase? But could we also get in that same request Hartford Public Schools? Because I can't, everything is rapidly changing. I can't even follow it. But did we ever get our tuition that we charge? Did we ever get that? Could we get that dollar amount and the amount of students and how much we increased to get that comparison versus the tuition that we're saying correct increase and it costs us this for this amount of students versus the amount of students we get tuition for, we increase and it was this amount? Like, could we get that comparison?
There was actually one of the budget presentations had all that data in it. And one of the things that we pointed out is that we're not allowed to charge general education tuition the way that the RESCs, the CRECs, the LEARNs, those kind of organizations in the state are allowed to charge. When we refer to tuition, that typically refers to us billing out for special education services for kids that are attending, suburban kids that are attending our magnet schools. That's really the only thing that we refer to as tuition that we're able to charge. And if you remember, we actually increased both in the current year and for next year, the amount of the money we expect to receive from those charges to about $4 million a year.
Are we able to get that comparison as I described it? So I don't have to, because the budget was, the information presented to us was changing and changing.
Yeah, I'll go back with work with Christina to get that to you.
Okay, and can we acknowledge on this call that it's not that we're charging the special education tuition, but I think we discussed on some calls ago that we do get tuition for students. We just don't call it tuition in our budget. We call it the Magnet School Operating Grant. So
no,
that's what
I'm sorry, that's not correct.
So that's what came up in a couple.
We do not receive anything in the Magnet School Operating Grant for Hartford residents.
No, because do we not get per pupil funding for our students?
Per pupil funding in the ECS, is that what you're referring to?
But because when we hear CREC is charging us tuition for our kids that go out, we do get funding for our students. It's not like, I don't know why we say it like that. As if CREC, oh, CREC increased or where Learn or whomever, we're paying out tuition, but we never talk about what we get. And we do get funding for our Hartford schools students, of course, but we do get funding for magnet school students, correct?
In the form of ECS, that's correct.
So does ECS fund our magnet school out of district, our suburban magnet students? Is that covered in ECS?
Can you state the question one more time? You lost me.
The magnet school students we have,
Resident or suburban?
suburban,
Okay.
we get money specifically for those students in what form?
In the magnet
ECS?
school operating grant.
That's what I'm saying. So we get funding for, like CREC gets funding for our students. We pay tuition. We get funded for magnet school suburban students, and it's not called tuition. It's called the magnet school operating grant, which is confusing because we're using grant on one hand and we're using tuition on the other, but essentially it's funding for magnet school students. When we pay it, we call it tuition. When we receive it, we call it a grant. That's what I'm trying to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brody. I think there was a slide, Chief Finn, I want to say that you created during the budget process that went through the different numbers. Something was like 13,000 or something like that. Perhaps we can look that up and redistribute that to.
Yeah,
board
that's the one
members.
I'm thinking of as well.
Okay, great. So we'll put that back out again. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, with that, this wraps up today's meeting. Thank you for attending and thank you for viewing. Until next time, and have a wonderful day.